right, everybody, welcome to the AmbientStream tour for Self-Portrait 1. Right now, we're going to start with the aWIP, or the artwork in progress for Self-Portrait 1. As you can see, I started literally on really thick watercolor paper, about 130, 150 pound. And what I did is that I started outlining everything in pencil, in charcoal, and as well as oil bar in certain places to really start to define the look and feel of the piece. And then with this, I was able to, in my sketches, kind of plot out the entire blueprint for the AmbientStream itself. All right, now let's take a look at the original and how we got here. So we started out with a pencil drawing, progressed to outlining the face with oil bar and charcoal, started building up the layers of the face that are going to contain the different pieces of the face that we're going to focus on, started to work with literally blotches of color and groups of colors, layered on the white overlay so that we could define the spaces, and then started to add color into the pieces of the face that we're going to focus on for the actual piece itself. And then as you can see how everything ended up, we see that we ended with having this kind of mark making, if you will, happening all around the face itself to give the canvas, give the paper, a little bit more depth, a little bit more life to it. And then what we see on the bottom left is I kind of put in, a little legend over there about all the different parts of the face that are active in the piece itself. And then as we progress onto the remixes and the motion pieces, what's fascinating about the original within the AmbientStream framework, the immersive art framework, is that we're going to look at the different parts of this this piece of art, this original piece of art, this analog piece of art, and we're gonna basically dissect it, right? Cut it apart, and then we're going to really explore the different themes of the image as we go into the remixes themselves. So now it's time to look at the remixes. We'll start by taking a look at the seven heads, if you will, and these heads are basically snapshots from a short film within the motion segment, which we'll look at in a little bit, and each of them has 10 iterations of color. Right, so the seven heads represent nature. Seven being what binds us, as man, to nature, and then each iteration takes on its own narrative of color, shadow, and feeling. So although we're seeing the same construct as an image, the different iterations give off a different vibe. And the really cool thing about exploring imagery in this way is that the viewer, the art viewer, gets to see all these different ways you could see something, through color, which adds a very dynamic dimension to the overall, display of the art. Now, similar to the seven portraits, as we get into the diptychs, there's also 7 variations. So with the diptychs, what I thought was really interesting is that when you see the head by itself, it's strong enough as an image on its own, but when you see the head going, vertically, going up and down as a juxtaposition or a diptych, you have the ability to really look at the same image in a different way, but comparatively. So the whole exercise and idea that you could look at something and then have the mirrored, inverted, opposite version of it, it creates a really interesting dimension to the work because you're able to see it in a much different light. And again, just like the 7 heads before it, the portraits, the single ones, there's also 10 iterations of color that communicate different things in the images. Now, to take a break from the heads, we're going to look at pain, right? The pain literally on the mouth area. I had braces for many, many years. As you know, braces are painful. I had some surgeries down there, et cetera, et cetera. So, there were those things around there that are representative. But even when you look at the pain and you look at the iterations with the color, you could also see that pain is not just this acute, sharp, feeling that you get, specifically your mouth area, but it could be in different doses. It could be lighter. It could be harder. It could be, it could be managed. So that's really what those images are meant to communicate. Now, getting back to our heads, we're now going to look at the triptychs. The triptychs are really fun, and they're also highly detailed. If you look at the 2 heads on the ends, on the left and the right, there are layered images, within the heads themselves. themselves, given the the symbolism of layering and spatial relationships, within the heads. But then when you look at the head in the center of the triptych, each one is different and conveying a different aspect of the original when it comes to the eyes, the adenoids, the braces, all sorts of different things. And then finally, with the remixes, we're going to end on, for the remix segment, the journey is gonna end with the following. So I put together this thing called the 6-up, which basically means that I took the original image and then dimensioned it by having each of the 5 individual images that represent each of the 5 individual traits of the face all next to each other, and so that the viewer could see everything summarized, if you will. Now the first iteration is of course the analog version of it, where you could see the watercolor paper, you could see the oil bar, you can see all the different things that are going on, and then what we did. Then from there, we're going to go look at the remix version of it. So you're going to see the digital version of the original iteration, if you will, and then to wrap up with the 6-ups, there's this final version where I kind of zoomed in on the remixes to show how each of the parts of the face are fighting for the viewer's attention. Because when you see the imagery and everything is the same size and it's almost in like this pattern type of cadence, it's easy to look at it and go, okay, there's the difference. Each one is speaking to the viewer in a very controlled and a very in a pattern. Basically, it's in a pattern. Now, the thing that interests me about the this last remix is that you're able to see how each of the pieces of art are fighting for your attention, how each of the pieces are saying, hey, hello, I'm here. But as they're fighting for the attention of the viewer, they're still harmonious in the way that they're displayed. So the pattern right now is really the shape of the canvas, if you will, and how they're all interconnected to each other. And then each of those pieces, in a much more pronounced and direct way, are fighting for the viewer's attention. All right, so now let's take a look at the motions. Okay, so in the motions we have 4 different variations of short film to look at here. So the first one has one head, right? It follows through with what we saw in the first iteration of the remixes, and similar to the remixes themselves, there are 10 iterations of color of the head. Right, and each one has its own flavor and its own feeling, its own draw, to it. And then moving from there, now we go on to the diptychs, and the diptychs in video have a really fascinating depth to color, because we're able to see the 3-dimensional space, not only on the left side, but now also on the right side. So when you're looking at it, there's always something new that you can see. There's always something new that could draw you in, and it's fascinating how we can watch these over and over again, and it's still fresh, which is phenomenally interesting. Now then moving on from there. So we looked at one head, we looked at 2 heads, now we're going to look at 3. So now we're going to have a triptych video here. Now the triptych videos are really interesting, because the way that I edited these together is that I wanted to see how I could play with time and space and color and shape and shadow to just create an interesting piece of short film that would not only retain the interest of the viewer, but bring a breadth and depth to the experience, where it could draw you in. You could constantly see things that are new, but it'll be very pleasant to engage with, and just be a fun thing to interact with. And the same storylines are still there about the history of the face. And all the different things that happened to my face, my childhood, and it retains all the gravity that we see throughout the the original piece, but now it becomes more playful, becomes more spatial, it has more of a character to it, right? And then finally, we're going to end the motions with a variation of the prior triptych, And then instead of having one video in the middle and having a very precise, 2 on the end, 1 in the middle, we're going to have 2 on the end, then 2 in the middle. And then what this is going to do, it's a little bit more chaotic than the other pieces, and there's a lot going on here. But I found the pieces to be a bit soothing, because you could focus on one of the 4 quadrants. You could focus on a few quadrants at the same time. But what's interesting is that with seeing all these different 3-dimensional spaces and the color and the lights and the feeling, it really starts to grow. It really starts to draw you in. And I really thought that the audience would really gravitate towards that. So that basically wraps up the motions. And again, these are videos that by design are very harmonic within their iterative states and disruptive at the same time. So in a way, it's kind of like going to a concert, and whereas each instrument is fighting for your attention. But in this case, we have, there is an audio aspect to it, but we also have the video in its own right, fighting for your attention as well. All right, yes, and now our friend, the NFT, the non-fungible token. So everything that you've seen in this AmbientStream thus far is available to be collected via an NFT. For more information about how to collect these pieces from this AmbientStream, either scroll down if you're on the website, or wait until the end of this video. There'll be a link for more information. The virtual reality representation of Self-Portrait 1 is currently in production. We ask that you check the website and our Twitter regularly to see where we're at. We're currently hard at work getting this live, and as soon as it's done, we will tell the world. Thank you very much for watching this AmbientStream tour of Self-Portrait 1. Please stay tuned for some links after the video, and we will see you next time in the AmbientStream.